Yeah, we met last time.
Yeah,
Good
yeah,
to
yeah.
meet you.
No, I
Good
get a
to
hug
see
from
ya.
her, don't I?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Nice to meet you, man.
Tommy, nice to meet you. What's your name?
I'm Nate.
I'm Corey.
Corey, nice to meet you guys.
Nice.
Oh my God, you're packing, man.
Look at that.
Don't shoot me, I'm
How are
innocent.
you?
All right, man. You guys want to go downstairs?
Yeah,
Yeah, let's
All
sit
right.
down there.
You guys mind if I drink a beer?
Go ahead.
All right, I'm gonna pull one out of the fridge and show you how we do it.
What graceful
In the land of Oz, you know.
You know, it's all rockstar, right?
Well, you know, I have waited all day. I'm pacing. It's gonna be a long night. I'll meet you guys. All right.
I went to elementary there. And then
Okay, I'm gonna say
went to high
something.
school at Westside.
Do as I say, not as I do.
That follows through.
Okay, you guys, you kind of know what that means, right?
Yeah.
Kind of. Well, yeah, there will be a day when
They're pretty
you
sharp.
get old enough to do whatever you want. You don't have to listen to nobody. So just do the right thing, the right way, at the right time, all the time.
Alright.
And with the right girl.
Well,
Well, their father
shop
was one
around,
hell of a guy,
okay?
so.
There's no one right now. Shop around. There might, you'll eventually meet her, but, you know, don't be afraid to shop around.
Well, you guys got any questions for Tom?
I noticed you guys are packing some old vintage vinyl, man.
Yeah, I've got
That's amazing. That's, you know,
Kids.
there's not a lot of people that have those.
Nope.
I tell you, they're rare.
Well, I talked to a lot of my friends. My girlfriend's got a few classic vinyl. She doesn't have a
Turntable?
turntable, but she's got some. And I've got a few friends who've got a few.
Well, I tell you what, if you find somebody that has a turntable, you'll know, okay, digital, you know, it's come a long ways. Back in the day, everything was analog. So it was vinyl or cassettes or 8 tracks or, you know. And you'll find out if you put that record on, digital's very clean and correct. It's actually, you know, like perfect. But the best way that I can kind of help you understand the difference between analog and digital is when you watch a soap opera on TV, like Oprah or whatever, how clear it is, you know, it's very crystal clear, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then when you see a movie, it's like, it's not as crystal clear, but it looks bigger and badder. It's got dimension. Because it has 3 dimensions, or video only has 2 dimensions. It has foreground and background. But it's correct. It's, I mean, sonically and visually, it's very perfect. But the human ear actually doesn't hear the distortion that's on that album. The distortion that is on the vinyl, because it's not perfect sonically, actually makes it sound bigger. It sounds bigger and it gives it a 3rd dimension. It gives it middle ground. So in film, everything's, when they do things digitally, they actually run it, film now, they still run it through machines that try to give it that film look, you know, instead of digital cameras, they'll do digital effects and everything, but they still run it through effects to try to give it that 3-dimensional ground. Because film, when you videotape something with, actually film something with film that's rolling on a reel, like the old films, it has little pixels and particles that absorb that, and they're color pixels, and they all come together to make the picture. Well, so there's a slight distortion in that. It's not crystal clear, but it's more pleasing to the human eye. The human eye actually likes that better than it does crystal clear, but it also gives it dimension. These vinyl records are the same thing. That slight distortion that you don't really pick up on with your ear actually makes it warmer sounding to the human ear, and the human ear picks up on it and it likes it better. So that's why it sounds bigger. So if you ever get a chance to play those on a turntable, pop them on and you'll find out how it really explodes off that vinyl.
How many
I mean, a
turntables
CD
does
sounds good.
Benny have?
I
Put that vinyl on. That's why people now,
think they
they've
got
gone
like
from
4 in my
vinyl
house.
and analog and digital,
Turntables,
and now
yeah.
all the big time
Okay.
bands are starting to go back to recording their albums on 2
Yeah, remember
inch
when I got a
and they
Bang
still
Olufsen
master the
turntable?
digital,
Yeah.
but they do
Wow,
all
stuff I've never
the
heard
master
of
tracks and
before.
everything.
Yeah, it comes through the
recorded on
speakers. You're like, whoa. Yeah.
And then they run it through
Yeah.
conversion
Because
units.
that was back in
What
the
the
day before
conversion
you had
units
the
do is
choice
they
of
try to take that
CDs.
analog
Yep.
sound
When I got that
and put
thing.
it to digital format without losing that 3rd
There's
dimension.
plenty of chairs.
And
You
they're
want
called
me to pull you one
apogées,
up,
and they got
Alex?
big time
I'm
machines
good,
that do that. They
I
convert
need to stand. I
what's
sit all
called
day
AV
long, so
conversion, analog to
I like
digital
standing.
conversion. So when you pop those vinyls on, if you have a friend or you have somebody's dad or mom, you know, people are starting to get back into buying turntables right now, just because it sounds so cool, and it's becoming really swag to have a stylus and a turntable. It's really becoming good. If you go out and you get yourself a nice stylus and a turntable, you'll be in like, man, you can have your friends over and start spinning vinyl, and you'll be the coolest guy on the block. I promise you, you really will.
I've actually got.
You'll get the hottest looking chick.
Yeah, the girls will think it's
Already
awesome.
do, classic.
Yeah.
my man!
Oh, yeah, his dad.
But, I've actually got a classic Sony turntable that my dad used to have. He gave it to me because it no longer plays 45s.
Right.
He gave it to me. It's about worth, if I were to sell it now, it would be about $400. And it actually sounds a lot better than my old one did. It wasn't a newer Sony one. But
So you understand the difference that I'm talking about, right?
Yeah,
As far as sonic and punch, and it just roars, man. I don't even know a better word to say. It roars, you know. And when Banshee got signed to Metal Blade Records, the whole industry was at the tail end of vinyl. Everybody was like, the new craze was CDs. You know, now it's MP3s and digital downloads. But at that time, it was cassettes. 8-tracks had gone out. They were already done. Nobody did 8-tracks anymore. But it was cassettes, and then CDs were the wave of the future. So vinyl was being phased out. So when that album came out, they did cassette and vinyl worldwide. Then when we signed off of Metal Blade to Atlantic Records and did the Race Against Time album, vinyl was out. Nobody was doing vinyl. Everybody was doing CDs and cassettes, and they were slowly fading out cassettes. It was all going CDs. We had to actually go to Atlantic Records and pitch a fit and stomp and piss and moan and say, look, you know, we want vinyl, you know. You know, I didn't come all this way, you know, because if you look at Atlantic Records was one of the biggest labels in the world, and all the Led Zeppelin records and AC/DC and Ted Nugent, you know, and all these great bands were on Atlantic Records, and they had the red and the green swirl in the middle of the album, you know, and I just kept seeing Banshee with the red and the green swirl. That was my vision. I wanted to see that on vinyl, and they said, we won't do vinyl anymore. And so we petitioned the label, and we fought like hell, and they did 100,000 vinyl records, and we were like one of the last bands to actually get our vinyl records made before it went all CD. We wouldn't have got that if we hadn't made such an issue out of it. And so they're precious and they're valuable. Now after all these years, you know, 25, almost 30 years, people finally are starting to realize that, man, nothing sounds like good vinyl. Nothing sounds like good vinyl. And so it's becoming cool again. What was uncool is becoming cool. So when you outgrow these shorts, or, you know, a certain shirt, of course, once you get to be the size you're going to be, don't ever get rid of them, because they could be out of style one day, and then 10 years later, you got them. Like parachute pants, you could be like, in style again, man. Except they don't call them parachute pants anymore, they call them cargo pants.
Yeah.
But they're the same damn thing.
Love it.
Oh, you guys are crazy, man. Well, I really, it's good to meet you guys, really. You're the youngest, newest fans I know right now, so you're starting a trend. I like that. I like that, really. You guys got any questions you want to ask? Have you listened to that record? You want to know about the apocalypse that I was singing about on that? The zombie apocalypse I was writing? No, just kidding.
I was just wondering, I haven't really looked at it super closely, but when was it made? Like, when did you like start recording for it?
I lived in Omaha, and I was in a touring band called The Lick, and I was in that band from 82 to 85, and we toured all over the United States. Well, I toured through Kansas City, and we were very well received. We sold out 4 concerts, 4 nights in a row, at the biggest rock venue down there. It wasn't a stadium or an arena, but it was like the biggest AAA venue that touring bands would go to. So we were basically, the Lick Band had reached the pinnacle, you know, where we were at. I mean, we'd taken it a long ways from the time I joined that band. And there was some friction in the band. Their vision was to learn cover tunes. And stop writing and doing all original music, because if you weren't on a major label and you had all your own music, it was hard to get gigs, hard to make money without the support of a record label. And we had a bus, and we had lights and sound and a semi-tractor truck that used to go with us down the road, and we had a lot of overhead bills. So their concern was keeping the band busy. So we started learning other people's music to fill in the all original music shows that we would do, and opening for national bands and doing headliners on our own with these cover tune bargains, you know, which was okay. I understood, you know, because you have the bills to pay. You got to keep rolling down the road, and it was a full-time job. But then eventually that band got to a point where nobody was writing any more music. Nobody was aspiring to go for the brass ring anymore, meaning, you know, all original, own albums, record deal, the brass ring. They were just worried about paying the bills and partying and just being treated like rock stars. And we were paid like rock stars. But at the end of the day, it started gnawing on me. Look, I need to know the truth. Am I supposed to be writing my own music? And is Tommy Lee Flood supposed to be doing something above and beyond the lick thing? And so it came to a head. I left the lick, and I decided to go to Kansas City because I met some talented players on the road, met them on tour. And Kansas City, you know, was really supportive of me when I went through there, and I felt like it was a city that I could afford to be in, where if I went to LA or New York, like everybody else, it was very expensive for rehearsal hall space out there, super expensive for studio time, almost beyond a budget that was realistic. And I felt like I'm going to take a shot in the Midwest in a town. Kansas City was a good-sized city, not as half the size of, you know, third of the size of LA, and there seemed to be a certain kind of a clique there where all the bands knew each other. It didn't matter what kind of music you played. If you were in a reggae band or a blues band or a disco band or a rock band or a metal band or whatever, everybody seemed to have this really tight-knit community, you know, clique where if I'm doing a show this week, everybody, you could just spread the word, and it would spread, you know, like wildfire. Hey, this guy's doing a show, or this guy's doing a party, a warehouse party, or whatever, and everybody knew. So you didn't have to buy a lot of radio ads to get the word out, which radio ads are very expensive. So, and rehearsal halls were affordable. Studio time was very affordable. I had a very good reputation, so studios would literally not pay me to come record there, but they would give me like studio time for $20 an hour instead of $200 an hour, because they could say, Tommy Lee Flood, the singer from The Lick, is starting a new band in Kansas City, and we want to be the studio that's doing his new album. So it was very affordable, and I had a lot of people supporting me. So I went to Kansas City. I started Banshee. I put $6 grand of my own money in. We recorded that EP. We decided to do a short version instead of a full-length album. So instead of having 10 songs or 12 songs and all of them kind of not being quite there on the mix or whatever, you know, we decided to pick our best 6 songs and put them, 5 songs, and put all of our money into that. And we felt like, you know, it's hard to give somebody 10 songs and them to listen to all of them, you know, but if we could give them 5 kick-ass tunes right out of the chute and grab their attention, you know, then we could do another record down the road and make some money on this one. This one was cheaper to make. We could sell it for cheaper, made it more affordable for people to buy, and we sold more units. It allowed us to start producing our own concerts and everything. So we recorded that album in 85 through 86. We played our first show in 1986 for 2,200 people at the Uptown Theater, and we sold $6 a ticket. And within a year and a half, Metal Blade somehow, through friends and people selling our records, handed it off to somebody in LA. The president of Metal Blade, Brian Slagle, called me up and said, "I got your record, I love it. I'd like to put you guys on the Metal Massacre Volume 9 album. We feature 10 new bands a year. This is the 9th time we've done it. We featured 9 new bands over the last 10 years, and inevitably after each one of these, and they were worldwide, internationally released, and there was no money in it. Basically, if you sold 1 million records, you could take the band out to dinner. That's how many royalties you'd make, because you only had 1 song on the record. But it was an exposure thing, worldwide, to be connected to a label that was worldwide and get a lawyer. We didn't even have a lawyer back then. We had no management. We were all self-managed, you know. I was pretty much the driving force, you know. Everybody worked in the band, but I was the guiding light. And so we got a professional lawyer, and he said, look, he sat down with us, and he said, actually, it was Lee Greenwood's lawyer, country western star. It was actually a country and western stars lawyer. And we had a temporary management company. He said, look, we can get you Lee Greenwood's lawyer. And we said, okay. And we had signed a temporary deal with this guy, kind of testing the ground. So we were still self-managed, but testing the grounds with this management guy, seeing what he could do before we signed our lives away. He said, I can get Lee Greenwood's lawyer in here. And he did. And Lee Greenwood's lawyer, he said, look, there's no money in this deal. He said, but if it's going to be about exposure, he said, the only thing I would change in this contract is that you want to be guaranteed side one, song one. And we said, why is that? And he said, because if the album, if all 9 other bands suck, and you're not number 1 on that album, they'll never make it to your song before they throw that album in the trash. So we're going to demand, if you want Banshee, we want you on Metal Massacre 9. We want side 1, song A, side A, song 1. And so we sent them the contract. They flipped out. They said, we've had 90 bands in 10 years and nobody has ever rewrote this contract. Who the hell do you think you guys are? Click. And we thought we had blown the whole thing. We thought that was the end. They called us back 5 days later and they said, we love it, we want you, and we want it on the album. You got song 1, side A. So it was a hardball. And that song, We Want You, off this record, launched Banshee's career worldwide. Off of that Metal Massacre compilation records, what they call that, second runner-up. And that was all the way across the world. So Atlantic Records, they offered, these guys, Metal Blade, offered us a 6-album deal, and they wanted to put the full album out. So they changed the color, they did a little difference. The original artwork didn't have this green on it, had the same picture and the same lettering and everything. But they changed, this was funny because if you ever saw the original, our version, same artwork, but the blood, this wasn't purple, this was blood. And they said, we can't put this in Walmart with this blood dripping down, it looks like hemorrhoids or something. So we got to change it to purple so nobody's freaked out about it. So we said, okay. And actually in the long run, I really like the way they colorized this a little different. It actually looks cooler purple to make it safer for Walmart ready or whatever, Whatever, we didn't care, we weren't complaining at the time, what I mean? We just were excited to get a record out. So they offered us a 6-album deal. And you look back in your career and you think there's sometimes where you might have made a mistake. Because Metal Blade, they weren't as big as Atlantic Records. So we would have been the biggest band on their label. They had a lot of bands, but they were so wanting Banshee. And with the excitement of the single coming out around the world, and everything hitting #1, and all these different radio markets, But when Atlantic Records stepped in and they offered us a 10-album deal and a lot more money, we didn't have the savvy to know, okay, we're just going to be one band of many other great bands on Atlantic, them being the strongest and biggest label in the world at the time. They did offer us a guaranteed MTV contract, though, that we were going to be on MTV, which was almost very necessary back in the day to have MTV videos. If you didn't have an MTV video, you were never going to graduate to the majors. You were always going to be in the minors. Metal Blade was kind of a minor league, biggest minor league label that was out there at the time. Independent labels, what they call them. But they were distributed by WEA, which is Warner Brother Elektra Atlantic Distribution, which is the world's biggest distribution company at the time. So they had the backing of the majors, but they were still an independent label. And there was also a stigmatism in the industry where if you were on an indie label, it was hard to graduate to a majors. So it's hard to go from the minors to the majors once you're established as a minor league team, basically. Right. People looked at you as your damaged goods rotting on the dock, like produce rotting in the sun. They didn't want to touch it. So there was a lot of things to think about, but Metal Blade, they would have pushed that record. They would have pushed it every day. They had a staff of 40 people and some hot girls working for them. Let me tell you, their staff, these chicks were so smoking hot. I'm telling you, we went out there and we're like, Brian, let the girls take us out. Kansas City, they've never been, they don't know their way around LA. We're like, come on, Brian. We're only here for a few days. He goes, okay. All right, girls, take them out and have a good time.
So at that point in time, in 1988, you guys were bigger than Jane's Addiction? At that
Absolutely.
point in time?
At that point in time, yes, we were.
Holy
Yeah.
crap, that's huge.
You know, and then, when Atlantic picked
Yeah.
us up, it exploded, you know, it really did. But unfortunately, we were kind of at the tail end of a 10-year decade of 80s music. And what had happened is, and it happens, there's cycles in the music industry. And it has nothing to do with how good the bands are, or how not good they are. What it is the industry becomes completely saturated, like one hit band signed, and then there's 20 bands that come in, labels sign 20 other bands that sound like that band. Like you get Cinderella, and then you get your Britney Foxes, you know, and you get all these other bands. You get Motley Crue, and then you get your Pretty Boy Floyds, and you get da-da-da. And pretty soon that goes on with hundreds of bands, and pretty soon the whole industry is saturated with the same sounding kind of music, and you guys should know this is better, just as good as anybody. How long have you heard something different come out on the radio? You've been listening to a lot of bands, and everybody's good, and your music that you like is good, but is there been anything original come out that just really like, wow, that's different, but I really like it?
Nope.
It takes somebody with big balls to sign a band that doesn't sound like everybody else and take a quantum leap and put that band out like they did Nirvana, like they did Guns N' Roses. Those bands changed the face of the music industry. Allison changed. It was all very polished. Everybody spent $6 million on their video and $1 million on their record. It was all polished, and you had to look like $1 million. You had to sing like $1 million, and it went from the beautiful people to the ugly people, where you got these bands coming out that were tattooed, hadn't taken a bath in 3 months, sound like the records were recorded in a garage, and it was grunge. Boom. And that's what kids wanted. They didn't want to listen to what their older brother and sister and their mom and dad grew up on and loved. They wanted something of their own. So they rebelled, and they went to grunge. And bands were dropped by the hundreds every day. Lost their, you know, labels could drop you. You couldn't drop the labels. But they could say, hey, we're going to set on you for 3 years and figure out where the music business is going. And they did that to Banshee after our second album. We had a great third album. We rose our head and we said, you know, in 3 years your career's over. Because that's a whole generation. You figure you're a sophomore in high school, you're graduating 3 years. And you're an adult, you're a young man. That's 3 years. That's a big chunk of real estate right there that's going right down the toilet. And while you're hot and you're on top, the number one thing is to keep putting your music out to the people that want to hear it. And if your label doesn't want to do that, guess what? When you sign that record deal, they own you. You don't have the choice like we did when we ran our own show. We produced our own records. We could do anything we want. We could play with anybody we want. We could record with anybody we want. We could do any shows anytime we wanted to. When you're on Atlantic Records, you don't play unless we say you can play. You don't record unless we tell you you can record. If we tell you you got to sit there 3 years, you're going to sit there 3 years. If we don't want to play your MTV video anymore, and we want that record to die so we can groom the market for the next record, we'll kill it. They have all the control. Very, very hard to swallow when you work so hard to get to that point, and then you realize you have no more control. So I'm going to record my third album and pay for it, put it out anyway, without their permission. I don't think there's too many people that have done that and survived, and we put out Taken by Storm. It was a great record. And Atlantic Records, we went to war, and it became a war, really. And it was a 2-year war, and it cost us about $150,000. And when we finally got out of our deal, we got out with By the Hair of Our Chinny Chin Chin. We didn't even get the rights to our second album. And they literally struck us from the face of reality, where you can go out on Atlantic Records, and every band that's ever been on Atlantic Records is in a roster. But you can go in and find their music and order it, and it says Atlantic, they were on Atlantic, they existed. Look for Banshee on Atlantic. Our name is nowhere. They literally, like we never existed. At the end of the day, who cares? Because they never really did anything for us anyway, except make money. They made a lot of money off of us. At the end of the day, you're sitting here 30 years later, you got my records, my first record, it looks in pretty good shape. Really, at the end of the day, that's all that really mattered to me. That's all that mattered. Never cared about the money, just cared about having a mutual experience with people that like the music, and we're all just a big family. So that's the magic. Atlantic Records are magic robbers, you know, the labels, they rob the magic, they take everything that was ever sacred, and they turn it into something that's not nice. And really, the only magic is that, you know, I play shows, people come, we're all there together. That's a magic situation. That you guys are here today, I happen to be in Omaha, it's kind of weird, but I did drive up here and rent a piece of shit car. Let me tell you, the car they made
It's fake.
is a wagon with a motor in it, man. I should be on the Oregon Trail. This thing is the roughest, noisiest car I've ever ridden in my life. And it's a dog, man. Can't get no rubber or nothing.
What is it?
It's a Hyundai. And it's
A Hyundai?
A Hyundai, or whatever they call it. Jesus, I'm on my F-150. You know, but, you know, so it still goes round and round, you know. It's not as big as it used to be. Obviously, it's not as many people, because there's a lot of fans that were in the day, and they're no longer with us now. You know, they've died of cancer, or killed in car wrecks, or been killed on motorcycles. I mean, I've seen a lot of people come and go. I'm lucky to be alive. I count my blessings every day. And it's not because I'm just a healthy guy that jogs every day or anything like that, but, you know, God's been good to me. Takes care of me. So, I could be dead tomorrow, I don't know. You know, God, he drank a beer. And it was a Tank 7 for crying out loud. And I even corrupted these folks.
Yeah.
It's a
Turned
good
on,
beer. It's a
yeah.
good beer, isn't it?
Yeah,
Oh,
it
I've
is.
seen Chris take pictures of his booze.
Oh, yeah.
All the time. I took.
And I moved to Kansas City. I got a warehouse, and I set that warehouse, and I lived in that warehouse. So I went from like a rock star status to where all of a sudden I had to go to work for a paint company. You know, I sold my house here in Omaha. I sold my motorcycles. I cashed in all my worldly value stuff. I took all the money and put into this album with the hopes and the dreams that, you know, I had this blind faith that God would not put me in a warehouse on Troost in Kansas City, which is the worst part of town. I mean, it was like a war zone. I was the only white guy, 100 blocks. I'm telling you what, I had bars on the windows. I remember people trying to break into my warehouse when I was in there, in the dark, with a 16-penny hammer, man, going, come on. But, you know, I remember eating cereal out of a box, you know, and I eat Wimpy burgers once a day, and I had so much faith that there's no way the good Lord would bring me down here and take me out of this van, and come down here and be in this warehouse if it wasn't my destiny. You know, I just had such a strong sense of there's no way I would, I'm a good guy. I've never screwed anybody. I'm being tortured here. Somebody's making fun of me. They're poking a doll with a needle. Tommy, look, you know, they're lighting on fire. There's no way that somebody would be doing this. I'm a good guy, unless it wasn't where I was supposed to be, in a town I never lived, around a bunch of people I never knew, putting everything I had on. You guys can say it took a lot of time, but from the time I moved into that warehouse and I got my first record deal, when that went world